Before you listen to my story, I want you to do something. Think about the most welcoming place you've ever been, a place where you felt instantly at home, where every smile was genuine and every door was open. Hold that feeling in your mind. That was Harmony Creek for me. It was the warm embrace I never knew I needed, the safe harbor for my family after a storm, and it was all a lie. They say it takes a village to raise a child. In Harmony Creek, it takes a village to bury a man, and I was next in line for the shovel. If you've ever felt like an outsider, like you were being sized up even when people were smiling at you, then you'll understand what happened to me. And if you've ever been betrayed by the very people you were supposed to trust with your life, then you're going to want to hear this. Stick around, because my story isn't just about revenge. It's about the fact that sometimes, the most idyllic places hide the darkest secrets. It all started the day I lost my job. A Tuesday, the kind of gray, soul-sucking day in the city that feels like it's personally trying to crush you. I was a senior financial analyst for a massive firm, a cog in a machine I'd once been proud of. But mergers are brutal, and my department was deemed redundant. I walked out of that gleaming tower with my life in a cardboard box, feeling less like a man and more like a line item that had just been deleted. That night, sitting in our cramped city apartment, the air thick with the smell of street food and failure, my wife Brenda took my hand. Her eyes, usually so full of life, were filled with a determined sort of hope. "Let's go home, Adam," she said. Home for her wasn't our two-bedroom apartment with the leaky faucet and the neighbors who fought at 3 a.m. Home was Harmony Creek, a place I'd only visited for holidays, a picture-perfect town nestled in a valley that always seemed to be bathed in golden light. It was the town where Brenda grew up, where her family had lived for generations, where the pace was slower and people still knew each other's names. For me, a guy who grew up bouncing between cities, the concept was as foreign as a silent subway car. "My parents would love to have us," she continued, her voice painting a picture I desperately wanted to believe in. "We could stay in the old guest house. The kids would have a yard. You could take a break, figure things out. It would be good for us." It felt like a lifeline. I looked at our two kids, 7-year-old Leo and 5-year-old Maya, who were used to a life of concrete playgrounds and hurried goodbyes. The idea of them running barefoot in the grass, of me being able to breathe without inhaling exhaust fumes, was intoxicating. So I said yes. We packed up our life, put our things in storage, and drove toward the sunrise, leaving the steel and glass cage of the city in our rearview mirror. The welcome was overwhelming. I'd expected a quiet transition, a few polite nods, the slow integration of a newcomer. What I got was a full-blown love-bombing campaign. The moment we pulled up to her parents' sprawling Victorian home, people started appearing. Mayor Thompson himself, a man with a booming voice and a handshake that could crush walnuts, was there on the porch. "Brenda, my girl," he roared, hugging her before turning to me. "And this must be the famous Adam. We've heard so much about you. Welcome, son. Welcome to the family." Family. He used that word, and it resonated deep in my chest. Within a week, I wasn't just Brenda's husband. I was Adam from the city, a minor celebrity. Casseroles and pies appeared on our doorstep. People stopped me in the town's single grocery store to ask about my career, my thoughts on the stock market, my life. They hung on my every word. It was flattering, disarming, and deeply seductive. After years of feeling invisible in a city of millions, I was suddenly seen. I was valued. The pinnacle of this bizarre honeymoon phase came a month after our arrival. Mayor Thompson called a special town meeting. I thought it was about road repairs or something mundane. He stood at the podium in the old town hall, a building that smelled of lemon polish and history, and cleared his throat. "As you all know, Founders' Day is just around the corner," he began. "It's a time to celebrate our heritage, our values, our community. And this year, we want to honor someone who embodies the spirit of new beginnings, of embracing our town not by birth, but by choice. Someone who has already shown himself to be a model citizen." He looked directly at me. My stomach did a nervous little flip. "I propose," he boomed, his voice filling the hall, "that this year's Founders' Day parade Grand Marshal be our newest neighbor, Adam." The hall erupted in applause. People were on their feet, smiling, clapping. Brenda squeezed my hand, her face glowing with pride. I felt a hot blush creep up my neck. Me, Grand Marshal. I hadn't done anything. I was just an unemployed analyst trying to get my bearings. But as I stood up and gave a clumsy, grateful wave, I felt a sense of belonging I'd craved my entire life. I was one of them. I was home. My duties as a model citizen began with small, easy tasks: joining the Historical Society, helping plan the Founders' Day Unity Feast. Then came the project that would unravel everything. Mayor Thompson clapped me on the shoulder one afternoon. "Adam, with your head for numbers and organization, you'd be a godsend. We have decades of old town records just rotting up in the town hall attic. Deeds, minutes, ledgers, a real mess. We need to digitize them, bring Harmony Creek into the 21st century. It's a volunteer project, of course, but it would be a tremendous service to the town." An honor. A service. How could I say no? I spent the next 2 weeks in that attic. It was dusty and hot, filled with the ghosts of forgotten paperwork. I'd work late, after the town hall staff had gone home, the only sound the hum of the scanner and the creak of the old floorboards. It was during one of those late nights, bathed in the yellow light of a single bare bulb, that my foot found it. A floorboard that gave just a little too much. Curiosity is a powerful thing. I knelt, prying at the edges with my fingers. It came up with a groan of old wood. And there, nestled in the dark space between the joists, was a heavy, iron-strapped chest. It wasn't a town chest. It was too ornate, too personal. It had a cheap, rusty lock on it. My heart beat a little faster. This was someone's secret. Using the small multi-tool I kept on my keychain, I jimmied the lock. It popped open with a pathetic little click. Inside, there was no treasure, no gold, no jewels, just books. A stack of old leather-bound ledgers, far older than the municipal records I'd been scanning. I opened the first one. The handwriting was elegant, looping script from the late 1800s. It was a financial ledger, but the entries were odd. They detailed town expenses alongside a second set of columns under the heading Contingency Fund. The numbers didn't add up. Money was being moved from public accounts into this contingency and then dispersed to a list of family names: Thompson, Gable, Weatherby, the founding families. I grabbed the next ledger. This one from the early 20th century. Same thing. And the next. Decades of it. A systematic, meticulous siphoning of town funds. Then I got to the more recent books. The scheme had evolved. It now centered around a specific 10-year cycle. Every decade, the contingency fund would be audited. And every decade, a massive shortfall would be discovered. And every time, the blame would fall squarely on one person. My blood ran cold when I saw the pattern. At the end of each 10-year section, there was a final entry. A name. 1978. Arthur Jennings, a teacher who'd moved in from out of state. 1988. Maria Flores, a nurse who'd opened a small clinic. 1998. Stephen Chen, an architect hired to design the new library. And then the last entry, from 10 years ago. David Miller. I recognized the name. I'd heard people mention him in hushed tones. The consultant from the city who nearly bankrupted the town. The man who was serving 20 years in a federal prison for embezzlement. They weren't just embezzling. They were luring people in, one by one, decade after decade, to be the fall guy. They'd welcome them, praise them, integrate them into the town's financial workings, and then, when the time was right, drop the hammer. Pin a century of their own collective fraud on a single, unsuspecting outsider. I flipped to the end of the last ledger. The pages were crisp, the lines clean. A new 10-year cycle had begun the year David Miller was convicted. It was an ongoing record of the current fraud. And at the bottom of the final page, waiting for the cycle to complete, was a blank space. A space just waiting for a name. A space they had carved out for me. The Grand Marshal, the model citizen, the next scapegoat. The air in the attic suddenly felt thin, suffocating. The friendly smiles, the pies, the praise. It wasn't a welcome. It was bait, and I had swallowed the hook, the line and the sinker. I stumbled out of the town hall that night in a daze. The quaint, charming streets of Harmony Creek suddenly looked sinister. The cheerful glow of the gas lamps, like the eyes of a predator. Every shadow seemed to hold a smiling face with a knife behind its back. I got back to the guest house, my hand shaking so badly I could barely turn the key in the lock. The ledgers, all of them, were in the trunk of my car. My evidence, my death sentence. Brenda was asleep. The kids were tucked into their beds, looking like little angels. My family. The reason I was here. The reason I was trapped. I sat in the dark living room, the weight of that discovery pressing down on me, crushing the air from my lungs. 100 years of meticulous, generational crime, and they had chosen me to pay for it. The welcoming arms of Harmony Creek were slowly closing around my neck, and I had walked right into their embrace, dragging my children with me. The next morning, the world was tinted with a sickening, surreal filter. The cheerful birdsong outside the window sounded like a mockery. When Brenda came downstairs, humming a tune as she started the coffee maker, I couldn't look at her. I saw her, and all I could see were the faces of the people who were methodically planning my destruction. Was she one of them? The thought was a physical blow, a punch to the gut that left me breathless. How could she not know? She grew up here. Her family was part of the town's inner circle. I had to test the waters. I had to know. I waited until she was sitting across from me at the kitchen table, sipping her coffee, looking for all the world like the woman I'd loved for 15 years. "It's amazing how nice everyone is here," I began, my voice sounding strained and foreign to my own ear. "Being Grand Marshal, it's a lot. I just hope I can live up to it." She smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that now seemed terrifyingly fake. "Of course you will, Adam. They love you. They see what I've always seen. You're a good man." "What about the last guy?" I asked, trying to sound casual, like it was a passing thought. "The one before me who moved here from the city. David Miller, was it? What was his story?" The change was instantaneous. It was subtle, but to my newly hyper-aware senses, it was a seismic shift. The light in her eyes dimmed. Her shoulders tensed almost imperceptibly. A little line appeared between her eyebrows. "Oh, him," she said, her tone becoming dismissive. "Cool. That was a sad situation. He got in over his head. Tried to play big city games with the town's money. It was a real mess." Mayor Thompson felt so betrayed. Betrayed. I pressed, my heart hammering against my ribs. He was an outsider. How did he get access to the town's money? "People trusted him," she said, and now there was a defensive edge to her voice. "They welcomed him. Just like they've welcomed you. He took advantage of their kindness." "Adam, why are you asking about this? It's ancient history. It has nothing to do with us." "But it had everything to do with us." Her answer was too clean, too rehearsed. It was the town's official story, delivered by my own wife. The dread that had been a cold knot in my stomach began to spread, an icy poison seeping into every part of me. She was either a masterful liar or a fool, and I wasn't sure which was worse. The possibility that she was complicit, that she had knowingly led me into this trap, was a chasm opening up at my feet. I felt a wave of nausea. That conversation set the tone for the days that followed. I lived in a state of suspended terror, a walking ghost in my own life. I had to pretend everything was normal. I smiled at the neighbors who were plotting my ruin. I continued my volunteer work in the attic, my hands trembling as I handled the benign, official records, while the real truth sat locked in the trunk of my car. Every interaction was now a potential clue, a piece of the puzzle I was frantically trying to assemble in my mind. And the flashbacks started coming, unbidden and sharp. Snippets of conversation, small moments that had seemed insignificant at the time, now replayed in my head with horrifying clarity. I remembered a barbecue at Brenda's parents' house a week after we arrived. Her cousin, a beefy guy named Greg who sat on the town council, had cornered me by the grill. He'd slapped me on the back, beer in hand. "So Brenda tells me you were a real whiz with corporate finances. Bet you could make sense of our town's budget in a heartbeat." Old man Gable, our accountant, he's a bit traditional, stuck in his ways. At the time, I'd laughed it off as small-town chatter. Now, I saw it for what it was: reconnaissance. They were sizing me up, testing my qualifications for the role of scapegoat. I remembered Mayor Thompson, during that first welcome, asking pointed questions about my old firm. Big company like that. I imagine there's a lot of pressure to make the numbers look good, eh? Creative accounting, they call it. He'd said it with a wink, like we were two men of the world sharing a cynical joke. It wasn't a joke. It was an audition. He was seeing if I had the vocabulary, the background, that would make my eventual crimes believable to federal investigators. And Brenda. Oh, Brenda. I remembered her pushing me to join the committees. "It'll be good for you to get involved, Adam. The finance committee for the Founders Day Festival needs a new chair. You'd be perfect." I'd been hesitant, wanting to lay low, but she was so insistent, so proud. She was a stage manager, pushing her lead actor into the spotlight. The memory made me physically ill. My lowest point came one evening about a week after my discovery. I was watching Leo and Maya chase fireflies in the backyard of the guest house. Their laughter echoed in the twilight, pure and innocent and beautiful. They were so happy here. They were thriving, and I had led them into the heart of a monster. I felt a surge of protective instinct so fierce it almost brought me to my knees. The thought of my son and daughter seeing their father dragged away in handcuffs, of having their names tarnished by a crime I didn't commit, of being the children of the town villain. It was unbearable. Running felt impossible. Where would we go? They had my name, my history. They were setting up a paper trail that would lead directly to me. A smear campaign from a whole town of witnesses would follow me anywhere. My career would be over. We'd be financially ruined. I'd be looking over my shoulder for the rest of my life. I felt trapped, cornered, with the walls closing in. The despair was a physical weight, a suffocating blanket. I retreated inside, went into the small study, and just sat in the dark, my head in my hands. This was it. This was how my life ended. Not with a bang, but with the quiet, methodical click of a 100-year-old trap. It was in that moment of absolute hopelessness that I found my catalyst. I started Googling, typing David Muller, Harmony Creek embezzlement into my phone with shaking finger. The search results were sparse, mostly old articles from a regional paper. They all told the same story: a charismatic financial consultant who had gained the town's trust and then ruthlessly exploited it. The articles quoted Mayor Thompson extensively, who spoke of his deep personal betrayal and the wound to the town's soul. It was sickeningly perfect, but then I saw it, buried at the bottom of a years-old article in the comments section. A single comment from a user named Smiller88. It was a cry in the digital wilderness. This is a lie. All of it. My father, David Muller, is an innocent man. He was framed by that entire town. They are liars and thieves. I will not rest until I prove it, and his name is cleared. My breath caught in my throat. Smiller88. A daughter. A daughter who believed in her father. A daughter who had been fighting this for a decade. Suddenly, I wasn't alone anymore. There was someone else out there who knew the truth. That single defiant comment cut through my despair like a bolt of lightning. The hopelessness began to recede, replaced by something else, something cold and hard and sharp. It was anger. A pure, crystalline rage. They weren't just going to ruin me. They had already done it to David Miller. They had stolen 10 years of his life, destroyed his family, and erased his name. They had a system for it. They called it tradition, a necessity to protect their idyllic way of life. I called it a conspiracy, a machine designed to chew up outsiders and spit them out. And in that dark room, staring at the words of a stranger on my phone, my resolve solidified. I wasn't going to be their next meal. I was going to be the poison that killed the beast from the inside out. I wasn't just going to escape. I was going to burn their rotten system to the ground. It wasn't about revenge until in that very moment, my entire mindset shifted. The fear didn't vanish, but it was overshadowed by a cold, calculating purpose. The first step was to play the part. I had to become the most enthusiastic, most helpful, most naive Grand Marshal they had ever seen. The next morning, I walked into the town hall with a box of donuts and a wide smile. I greeted Mr. Gable, the ancient town accountant, whose signature was on decades of fraudulent documents. I made a point of asking him dumb questions about the town's finances, making myself look like a city slicker who was impressed by their quaint small-town ways. "Gosh, Mr. Gable," I said, leaning over his desk. "It's amazing how you keep all this straight, with just paper and ink. My old firm wouldn't have known what to do without a dozen different software suites." He chuckled, a dry, rustling sound. "We have our ways, son. We have our ways." "Oh, I bet you do, you old ghoul." While I played the fool by day, I was a man possessed by night. My first priority was the ledgers. I couldn't keep them in my car forever. In the dead of night, I drove an hour out of town to a 24-hour copy shop. I spent 5 hours, and a ridiculous amount of money scanning every single page of every single ledger, front and back. I created high-resolution digital copies, saved them onto multiple encrypted thumb drives, and uploaded the entire collection to 3 separate heavily firewalled cloud storage accounts, each under a different anonymous name. The physical books, the original sin of Harmony Creek, I then placed in a safety deposit box at a bank in a different city, 2 hours in the opposite direction. The evidence was now secure and decentralized. If they came for me, the truth wouldn't disappear with me. With the evidence safe, my investigation began in earnest. I was no longer just a victim. I was a forensic analyst on the most important case of my life. The ledgers showed the what, the siphoning of funds. Now I needed the how and the who. The newer ledgers detailed payments from the town's community development fund into a handful of LLCs, Harmony Valley Holdings, Creekview Properties, Thompson and Sons Heritage. They sounded so wholesome, so local. My fingers flew across my laptop keyboard, diving into public records databases. It was amateurishly brilliant. The LLCs were registered with the state, all perfectly legal on the surface, but when I cross-referenced the registered agents and board members, the same names appeared again and again. Thompson, Gable, Weatherby, and a dozen other founding families. They weren't just embezzling, they were laundering the money through their own shell corporations, disguised as payments for consulting services, land management, and historical preservation surveys. The real kicker, the detail that made my blood run both hot and cold, was the source of the funds. I dug into the town's budget, the one they'd so proudly given me access to. A significant portion of the Community Development Fund came from federal grants, grants for rural economic stimulus, grants for preserving historical landmarks. They weren't just stealing from their own tax base, they were stealing from the United States government. This wasn't just a local matter for a compromised county sheriff. This was a federal crime. This was mail fraud, wire fraud, and given the organized long-term nature of it, it was a textbook RICO case. Racketeer, influenced and corrupt organizations. The kind of thing that makes federal prosecutors salivate. The case was building, but I was still just one man with a set of damning documents. I needed an ally, someone on the outside who could see the whole board. I called Mark. Mark and I had started in the analyst pool together right out of college. He was sharper than me, more cynical, and had left the corporate world to start his own forensic accounting firm. He specialized in tearing apart companies that were trying to hide money. Adam, man, I was worried about you. Thought you'd been eaten by a bear or converted into a farmer, he said, his voice a welcome blast of city sarcasm. Worse, Mark, much worse, I said. I told him everything. The move, the welcome, the Grand Marshal title, the attic, the ledgers. I could hear him leaning forward in his chair as I spoke. I sent him the link to one of the secure cloud drives. There was silence on the other end of the line for a long time, then a low whistle. Adam, he said, his voice stripped of all humor. This is insane. This is a work of art. A century of organized crime disguised as civic duty. It's beautiful and horrifying. You realize what you have here, right? This isn't just embezzlement. This is a dynasty built on fraud. This is RICO. You could bring down the whole town. I know, I said, and they're planning to pin the last 10 years on me. Mark, I need your help. I need you to build an airtight, undeniable case from this. I need a professional report that a U.S. attorney can look at and immediately understand. Consider it done, he said, a new excitement in his voice. Pro bono. This is the kind of case that makes a career. But Adam, be careful. These people are not quaint small-town folks. They're cornered animals protecting a century-old kill. They will do anything to stop you. Mark was my outside expert. Now I needed an inside guide. I needed to find Smiller 88. I needed Sarah Miller. Finding her wasn't hard. Her father's case had been public enough that a few searches led me to her. She was a paralegal living in a town about 40 miles away, working a quiet life, but her social media footprint, small as it was, occasionally flared with posts about injustice and wrongful convictions. She was still fighting, even if no one was listening. Getting her to meet me was the hard part. I sent her an email from an anonymous account. I have information about your father's case, information that could prove his innocence. I live in Harmony Creek. Her reply was swift and suspicious. Who is this? How did you get my email? My name is Adam. I'm new here. They've made me feel very welcome. I think they're doing to me what they did to your father. Please, just meet me. Coffee, Public place. Give me 10 minutes. She agreed to meet at a sterile anonymous coffee shop halfway between her town and mine. She was in her late 30s, with tired eyes that held a fire I recognized. It was the same fire I now felt in my own gut. She sat across from me, arms crossed, her posture radiating distrust. "You have 10 minutes, she said, her voice flat. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I didn't want to spook her by revealing everything at once. I started with what she knew. "Your father's trial," I began. "The evidence against him was all circumstantial, wasn't it? Paperwork that suddenly appeared, financial records that were reconstructed by the town accountant, Mr. Gable." She nodded slowly, her eyes narrowing. "How do you know that?" "Because I've been volunteering at the town hall. I'm digitizing their records," I said, making air quotes with my fingers. "And I've seen things. Inconsistencies, drafts of financial reports with notes in the margins. It looks like they were building a narrative, a story to tell." "Tell me something I don't know," she said, her voice laced with the bitterness of a decade of frustration. This was the moment of truth. I slid my phone across the table, an image already pulled up on the screen. It was a high-resolution photo of one page from the ledger, the final page of the 1998 to 2008 cycle. It showed the final fraudulent transfers, the fabricated losses, and at the bottom, in Mayor Thompson's unmistakable handwriting, was the entry "Scapegoat, David Miller, blame assigned, cycle complete." Sarah stared at the screen, her breath hitched, the color drained from her face. She picked up the phone, her fingers tracing her father's name as if she could touch him through the glass. The defensive armor she had worn into the coffee shop crumbled, her shoulders slumped, and a single tear traced a path down her cheek. It was a tear of vindication, of sorrow, of 10 years of agony encapsulated in a single moment. "You have more?" she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "I have all of it," I said softly. 100 years of it. She looked up at me, and the fire in her eyes was now a raging inferno. "What do you need?" "Everything," I said. "I need your father's case files, every note his lawyer took, every name of every person who gave a deposition, and more importantly, every name of every person who refused to talk. They have the system, you have the history, I have the proof. Together we can give them both what they deserve." She became my most vital ally. She brought me a box of files that evening, a treasure trove of her father's failed defense. In it were the puzzle pieces I was missing, the social web of the town, notes from her father's lawyer detailing how key witnesses suddenly changed their stories or couldn't recall crucial events, a list of townspeople who seemed sympathetic but were too afraid to testify. Sarah's knowledge combined with the ledgers was devastating. We now had the what, the how, and the who. But the final piece of my plan was leverage. Going to the feds was the end game, but it wasn't the first move. A federal investigation would take time. In that time, they could still destroy me. They could still smear my name, tie me up in legal knots, and use the town's collective weight to crush me. I needed to defang the beast before I exposed it. I needed to take away its power. And its power wasn't just in its secrets. It was in its money. It was time to stop investigating and start acting. It was time for the silent takeover. Playing the role of the smiling, oblivious Grand Marshal was the hardest acting job of my life. Every day felt like walking a tightrope over a pit of vipers, but the performance was essential. It kept them comfortable. It kept them from accelerating their timeline. While I was nodding along at town planning meetings, Mark was working furiously in the city. He'd finished his analysis of the ledgers, producing a 300-page report complete with charts, timelines, and a detailed breakdown of the racketeering charges. It was a masterpiece of financial destruction, but we both knew that a report, no matter how damning, was just paper. To truly control the situation, I needed to hit them where they lived, their wallets. Our deep dive into the town's finances had revealed the scheme's linchpin, the Harmony Creek Community Land Trust. On the surface, it was a noble endeavor. The trust owned most of the commercial real estate in town, the general store, the diner on Main Street, the old cinema, even the sprawling farmlands that surrounded the valley. This structure, they claimed, prevented outside corporations from coming in and destroying their way of life. It kept Harmony Creek pure. In reality, it was the central hub for their money laundering. The embezzled federal grant money was funneled into the trust to artificially suppress the rents for the businesses, all owned by the founding families, of course. and to service the massive debt the trust had accumulated over the years. The whole town was a Potemkin village, a charming facade built on a mountain of fraudulent debt, and that debt was my way in. Mark's research uncovered that the trust's entire debt portfolio was held by a single struggling regional bank, First Patriot Mutual. They were over-leveraged, undercapitalized, and desperate for liquidity. They had been the town's silent, compliant partner for decades, never asking too many questions as long as the interest payments came in. "They're weak, Adam," Mark had said over the phone, his voice buzzing with the thrill of the hunt. "And the trust's charter has an old dusty clause from the 1920s. It was designed to prevent a hostile takeover, but it has a loophole. It states that any single creditor holding a majority of the trust's debt has the right to demand a full independent forensic audit and to appoint a member to the oversight board. They never imagined one person or entity would ever own that much of their debt. The plan was audacious, bordering on insane. Using a significant chunk of my life savings, the money I had set aside for my kids' college and my own retirement, we were going to buy their debt. Mark set up a shell corporation, a completely anonymous LLC with a bland, forgettable name, Mid-Atlantic Fiduciary Solutions. It was based out of Delaware, untraceable to me. Then, acting as MAFs, he approached First Patriot Mutual. He didn't offer to buy the Harmony Creek debt outright. That would be too suspicious. Instead, he made an offer to buy a large portfolio of their distressed loans, with the Harmony Creek Trust debt bundled inside. For the bank, it was a godsend. They got to offload a pile of risky assets and get a massive cash infusion. They bit so hard they almost broke their teeth. The transaction took 2 weeks to clear. 2 weeks of me smiling, shaking hands, and discussing float designs for the Founders' Day parade, all while my entire financial future was on the line. The day the deal closed, Mark sent me a one-word text: "Done." I felt a surge of adrenaline, a feeling of terrifying power. Overnight, I had gone from being the town's designated patsy to its primary creditor. I owned them. They just didn't know it yet. With the financial weapon in place, it was time to let them know a new player was on the field. Mark, on behalf of Mid-Atlantic Fiduciary Solutions, drafted our first official communication. It was a simple, legally impeccable letter addressed to the trustees of the Harmony Creek Community Land Trust, namely, Mayor Thompson and the town council. The letter politely introduced MF as the new holder of their debt, and pursuant to Clause 7B of the Trust Charter, formally requested copies of their complete, unredacted financial statements for the past 10 years for review. We sent it via certified mail. I was in the post office, buying stamps for a letter to my mother, when I saw Mayor Thompson's son Kyle come in to pick up the town's mail. I watched him sign for the envelope. The first shot had been fired. The Founders' Day parade was now less than 2 weeks away. This was their window to frame me. I could feel the pressure mounting. The gentle, friendly questions became more pointed, more urgent. Mr. Gable, the accountant, started stopping by my table in the attic. "Adam," he'd say, peering at me over his spectacles, "I've found another one of those discrepancies. A fund transfer from a few years back with no corresponding invoice. With your sharp eye, maybe you could see where this money might have gone. Your predecessor, Mr. Miller, he had a theory about offshore investments. He was feeding me the narrative. He was planting the seeds of the very crime they were going to accuse me of. I would play dumb. Gosh, Mr. Gable, that's way above my pay grade. Looks like a simple clerical error to me." His frustration was palpable. Their patsy wasn't taking the bait. Then they sent in Brenda. This was the cruelest move of all. She came to me one evening, her face a mask of concern. She was holding a stack of paper. "Adam, honey," she started, her voice soft and pleading. "Mayor Thompson is really in a bind. The state auditors are doing a preliminary review before the Founders' Day grant is released. It's just routine, but Mr. Gable is so flustered. The mayor just needs you to look over these summary reports and sign off on them. He said your signature, as an outside financial expert, would put everyone's mind at ease." I took the papers from her. It was a condensed, sanitized version of the town's finances for the past few years, and at the bottom of the last page was a signature line, right under a statement attesting to the accuracy and completeness of the records. It was the trap, beautifully laid. My signature on that document would be my confession. I looked at Brenda. I searched her eyes for any flicker of guilt, any sign that she knew what she was asking me to do. But all I saw was a desperate desire for everything to be okay, a willful blindness that was more damning than outright malice. I handed the papers back to her. I can't, Brenda, I said, my voice quiet but firm. I can't sign anything I haven't personally and completely audited myself. It would be unprofessional. Her face fell. Unprofessional. Adam, this is Harmony Creek, not some cutthroat Wall Street firm. This is about trust. Mayor Thompson trusts you. My father trusts you. Why are you being so difficult? It's my professional integrity, Brenda, I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. It's all I have left. The next day, the real panic began. It started not because of my refusal to sign, but because of the letter. I was at the diner on Main Street, forcing down a coffee, when Mayor Thompson and Mr. Gable came storming in. They didn't see me in my corner booth. Their faces were pale, their movements agitated. Who the hell is Mid-Atlantic Fiduciary Solutions? Gable hissed, his voice a frantic whisper. I've never heard of them. Some vulture fund out of Delaware. Thompson growled, crumpling a piece of paper in his fist. It was our letter. They bought our debt from First Patriot, all of it, and now they're demanding a full audit. They can't do that. According to the charter they can, Thompson spat. And if we don't comply they can call the loan. The entire balance. We'd have to liquidate the trust to pay it. We'd lose everything. The whole damn town. Gable looked like he was going to have a heart attack. But the Founders Day grant, we need that to make the next interest payment. We can't get the grant until the state auditors sign off, and they won't sign off without a clean report. We need to frame the new guy now. He won't sign the papers. Thompson slammed his fist on the counter, making the salt shakers jump. The city slicker is getting squeamish. We're running out of time. I sank lower in my booth, my heart pounding a triumphant, terrifying rhythm. The plan was working. I had them in a box of their own making. Their need for the grant money was forcing them to accelerate their plot against me, but their new creditor, me, was simultaneously strangling their ability to operate. Their century-old machine of fraud was grinding to a halt, and the gears were beginning to scream. The silent takeover was complete. Now it was time for the power shift. Now it was time to disappear. The walls of the guest house, once a symbol of refuge, now felt like the walls of a prison cell. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves outside the window, sent a jolt of anxiety through me. They were desperate. Thompson, Gable, the whole town. A desperate animal is a dangerous animal. I knew they would make their move against me soon, likely on Founders Day itself, turning a celebration of unity into my public execution. I had to get my children out. The decision to leave was easy. The execution was the hardest thing I'd ever had to do. It meant confronting Brenda, forcing a final catastrophic reckoning. There was no way to sugarcoat it, no way to gently ease her out of the fantasy she had chosen to inhabit. I had to shatter it. I waited until the kids were asleep. I found her in the living room, reading a book, a picture of domestic tranquility. My heart ached with a mixture of love and betrayal. This was the woman I had built my life with, the mother of my children, and I was about to detonate a bomb in the middle of our marriage. Brenda, we need to talk, I said. My tone was flat, devoid of the warmth she was used to. She put her book down, a flicker of apprehension in her eyes. I got a job offer today, I began, laying the foundation of the lie. An incredible one. A former colleague started his own firm in the city. He wants me to be his partner. The money it's life-changing. We have to go back. Her face clouded over. Go back. Adam, we just got here. This is our home. The kids are so happy. My family is here. I don't want to go back to the city. There's nothing for us here, Brenda, I said, my voice hardening. This place isn't what you think it is. What are you talking about? She said, standing up. The defensive walls were going up again. This place is perfect. People are kind. They value us. They made you Grand Marshal, for God's sake. You're just scared because you failed in the city, and you're looking for an excuse to run away again. The accusation, the sheer injustice of it, broke something in me. The calm, calculated facade I had maintained for weeks cracked wide open. Failed, I shot back, my voice rising. I didn't fail, Brenda. I was made redundant. And then I came here, to your perfect town, and I'm about to be made redundant again. But this time it comes with a 20-year prison sentence. She stared at me, her mouth agape. What are you talking about? You're being paranoid. Am I? I took a step closer, my voice dropping to an intense, furious whisper. Am I paranoid, Brenda? Or did you lead your husband and your 2 small children into a town-wide conspiracy to frame an innocent man for a century of theft? Did you walk me right up to the chopping block and smile while they sharpen the axe? Tears welled in her eyes. That's not true. It's not like that. Then what is it like? I pressed, relentless. What is it like when the town you love has a tradition of luring in an outsider every 10 years to take the fall for their crimes? What is it like, knowing that the last guy, David Miller, is rotting in a cell for something your friends and neighbors did? What is it like when you know they've chosen me to be next? She collapsed onto the sofa, sobbing, her hands covering her face. I didn't know, she cried, her voice muffled. I didn't know the details. I swear, but you knew something, I said, my voice cold. I wasn't yelling anymore. The coldness was worse. You knew something was wrong. You knew the town had a dark side. You knew the story about David Miller didn't add up. But you chose to look away. You chose this place over me. You chose this lie over your own family. Her sobs were her confession. She had known. Maybe not the specifics, not the ledgers in the attic, but she knew the core of it. She knew the town protected itself in ugly ways, and she had made a choice, consciously or not, to believe the fantasy because the truth was too horrifying to confront. The truth would have meant admitting her idyllic childhood was a sham, and her beloved family were criminals. Willful ignorance. It was the deepest betrayal of all. I stood there for a long moment, the sound of her crying filling the room. The love I felt for her was still there, but it was now hopelessly tangled with this monstrous betrayal. I couldn't fix it right now. All I could do was save my kids. I'm packing a bag for Leo and Maya, I said, my voice flat and empty. We're leaving tonight. You have a choice, Brenda. You can come with us and we can try to figure out what's left of our lives. Or you can stay here in Harmony Creek, with your family and their secrets. But either way, I am taking my children out of this house in 1 hour. I walked upstairs without waiting for an answer. I packed their favorite toys, their blankets, a few changes of clothes. I worked on autopilot, my mind a numb buzz of pain and purpose. When I came back downstairs, 2 small duffel bags in my hand, Brenda was standing by the door. Her face was tear-stained and pale, but she had a coat on. She had made her choice. We left like thieves in the night. No goodbyes, no notes. I carried a sleeping Maya to the car, and Brenda led Leo by the hand. We drove away from the guest house, away from Harmony Creek, not even looking in the rearview mirror. The silence in the car was heavier than any argument. The moment the sun rose, the calls began. First it was Brenda's mother, her voice syrupy with fake concern. Brenda, honey, we missed you for breakfast. Is everything all right? Then came Mayor Thompson, his tone shifting from avuncular to demanding. Adam, we need to talk. There's been a serious misunderstanding. You can't just leave. You have responsibilities here. I ignored them all. I let the calls go to voicemail. We drove for 8 hours, stopping only for gas, and checked into a nondescript motel in a state where they wouldn't think to look for us. I bought a burner phone. The voicemails became more and more unhinged. They had realized we weren't just on a day trip. We were gone. The pleading turned to threats. Adam, you listen to me. Mayor Thompson's voice snarled from my phone speaker. We have records. We have witnesses. If you don't come back, we will go to the authorities and tell them you fled because you were guilty. We will ruin you. They tried to freeze my bank accounts, but it was too late. I'd transferred my liquid assets to a new account under a new bank the week before. They started their smear campaign. Sarah Miller, my eyes and ears on the ground, texted me updates. The town was buzzing with the story. Adam, the charming city slicker, had been caught with his hand in the cookie jar and had cowardly fled in the night, abandoning his post as Grand Marshal. They thought they were cornering me. They thought they were in control, but they were playing checkers, and I was playing chess. I wasn't running from them. I was drawing them into the open. I was letting them build my gallows in the public square, all while I held the lever to the trapdoor beneath their own feet. The power had shifted. They just didn't know how completely yet. We were holed up in a sterile extended stay hotel 3 states away. The kids thought it was a grand adventure, a surprise vacation. For Brenda and me, it was a purgatory of whispered conversations and shared glances heavy with unspoken words. Our marriage was in a state of suspended animation, broken but not yet buried. She moved through the days like a ghost, her face etched with a shame so deep it was painful to look at. She had chosen to come with us, with me, and that single act was the only thing holding us together by a thread. But the real work, The real reckoning would have to wait. I had one final move to make. It was time for the confrontation. Sarah had confirmed through her network of contacts that the town leadership was in full-blown panic mode. The Founders' Day celebration was a bust. The state grant was on hold pending an explanation for the sudden disappearance of their star citizen and the ominous demands from their new creditor. They had scheduled an emergency, closed-door meeting of the Land Trust Board. That was my stage. I wasn't going to face them in person. That would be their territory, their advantage. I was going to do it from a position of absolute safety and control, from the bland business center of a hotel hundreds of miles away. Using my burner phone, I sent a single text message to Mayor Thompson's personal cell number. It was a Zoom link, a time, and one sentence. You'll want to be there. All of you. At the appointed time, I sat at a small desk, my laptop open. Brenda sat beside me, a silent, pale witness. Her presence was non-negotiable. She needed to see this through to the end. One by one, their faces popped up in the virtual waiting room. Mayor Thompson, Mr. Gable, Brenda's uncle, Greg, the heads of the 3 other founding families, a collection of grim, angry old men. I let them all in at once. Mayor Thompson's face, red and bloated with fury, filled the screen. He started yelling before I could even speak. Adam, what is the meaning of this? You think you can run and hide? You have committed a serious crime, son. You have betrayed this town's trust. We have proof. I let him rant. I let them all get their accusations out. Their faces a mixture of self-righteous anger and poorly concealed fear. I sat there, my expression calm, neutral. When they finally ran out of steam, a tense silence fell over the video call. Are you finished? I asked, my voice even. I didn't wait for an answer. I clicked the share screen button. The first thing that appeared on their screens wasn't a spreadsheet or a document. It was a simple, clean logo, a stylized imagery, intertwined. Underneath it, the words Mid-Atlantic Fiduciary Solutions. I watched their faces. I saw the exact moment the blood drained from them. The flicker of confusion, then dawning horror, then sheer, stark terror. Thompson's jaw went slack. Gable looked like he was going to choke. They knew that name. It was the name of the faceless entity that had been tormenting them for weeks. I believe you've received some of our correspondence, I said calmly. I just wanted to put a face to the name. The silence was deafening. I let it hang in the air for a full 10 seconds before I switched screens. The next image was the high-resolution scan of the first ledger, from 1898. I slowly, deliberately, scrolled through the pages. Then I pulled up the next ledger, and the next, a relentless, silent parade of their ancestors' crimes. I clicked to the file for 1978, and zoomed in on the name Arthur Jennings, then 1988, Mireya Flores, then 1998, Stephen Chen. Finally, I landed on the last page of the 2008 ledger. I zoomed in on the final entry, scapegoat, David Miller, blame assigned, cycle complete. Recognize the handwriting, Mayor? I asked, my voice still quiet. Thompson was as white as a sheet. He looked like he couldn't breathe. I didn't stop. I shared the next screen. It was Mark's forensic analysis, a slick, corporate-looking presentation. Charts and graphs detailed the flow of money from federal grants into the Community Development Fund, then into their shell corporations. I showed them the legal statutes they had violated: mail fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy, and then the final beautiful, terrible slide. Ryko, my associate, who you know as Mid-Atlantic Fiduciary Solutions, has prepared a comprehensive report, I explained, as if I were giving a boring corporate presentation. It links every one of you on this call, and your families, to a criminal conspiracy spanning more than a century. It's particularly compelling because it demonstrates, with irrefutable proof, a pattern of racketeering activity. U.S. attorneys tend to get very excited about cases like this. They build careers on them. I stopped sharing my screen and looked at their stunned, broken faces. The power dynamic had not just shifted, it had been inverted with crushing force. They were no longer the proud patriarchs of a storied town. They were just a handful of old, frightened criminals in a Zoom window. So here's the new reality, I said, laying out their future. You have 2 options, and you will decide which one you're taking before this call ends. Option 1, I do nothing. I simply let my company, which holds all of your town's debt, foreclose on the land trust. The debt-to-asset ratio is, well, you know what it is. It's catastrophic. We will take possession of every commercial property, every farm, every asset held by the trust. We will sell them off to the highest bidder. The town of Harmony Creek as you know it will be dismantled and liquidated. Your families will lose everything. Your legacy will be a crater. I paused, letting the image sink in. Option 2, I continued, is this. You are going to write and sign a full collective confession. You will detail the entire 100-year history of this scheme. You will name every participant, living and dead. Most importantly, you will explicitly detail the deliberate framing of David Miller. That confession will be delivered by you, Mayor Thompson, in person, to the nearest U.S. Attorney's office tomorrow morning. Furthermore, a trust will be established, funded by your personal assets, your homes, your savings, your retirement accounts, to pay restitution to David Miller for the 10 years of his life you stole. Sarah Miller will be the sole administrator of that trust. And finally, the town charter will be immediately amended to dissolve the land trust and place the town's governance into a temporary receivership, to be overseen by an independent administrator of my choosing. I leaned back in my chair. It's your choice. Complete and utter financial ruin, or public disgrace and federal prison. What's it going to be? The silence that followed was the sound of a century of arrogance and impunity collapsing under its own weight. I saw Mayor Thompson look at the other faces on the screen, searching for some sign of defiance, some spark of the old power. He found none. He just found the same hollow-eyed despair he felt himself. He slumped in his chair, a broken old man. He finally looked at the camera, at me. Option 2, he croaked, his voice a dry rasp. We'll do it. The aftermath was a quiet storm. True to his word, Mayor Thompson and the others drove to the federal building the next morning. The indictments came down swiftly. The news hit the national wires. Quaint American town uncovered as century-old criminal enterprise. FBI agents in blue jackets became a common sight on the streets of Harmony Creek. The founding families were disgraced, their assets frozen, their names transformed from pillars of the community to bywords for corruption. The most beautiful moment for me came not from their downfall but from a news photo I saw a few weeks later. It was a picture of David Miller, looking older and thinner, but standing tall, walking out of the federal penitentiary a free man. His daughter, Sarah, was wrapped in his arms, her face buried in his shoulder. That picture, that single moment of restored justice, felt more satisfying than any personal victory. It had stopped being about my revenge and had become about his vindication. My anonymous company, Mid-Atlantic Fiduciary Solutions, worked with a legitimate restructuring officer and Sarah to rebuild the town. We didn't liquidate it. We sold the assets of the old trust to new people, young entrepreneurs, families who wanted to build something real and honest. Sarah used her father's restitution fund to start a foundation that provides legal aid to the wrongfully convicted. Harmony Creek was being reborn, not on a foundation of secrets, but on the hard-won ground of truth. So what about Brenda? What about us? That's the messy part, isn't it? Life isn't a clean narrative. There are no easy resolutions when the betrayal is that deep. We didn't just magically heal. We're in therapy, both of us. She is grappling with a lifetime of lies she was taught to ignore, and I'm grappling with how to trust the woman I love, who stood by while my future was being auctioned off. It's a slow, painful process. We're fighting for our family, for Leo and Maya, who deserve a home built on truth, not a charming lie. Some days I look at her and see the woman I fell in love with. Other days, I see the gatekeeper of Harmony Creek. I don't know if that will ever fully go away. The whole ordeal taught me something though. It taught me that charm can be a weapon, and tradition can be a cage. It taught me that you should never ever underestimate the quiet, responsible person in the room. They see everything, and when they finally decide they've had enough, they don't just get mad. They get strategic. They tear it all down, not with rage, but with receipts. So now I'm asking you, what would you have done in my shoes? Would you have packed up your family and just run, hoping they wouldn't follow? Or would you have done what I did? Did I go too far? Was it justice? Or was it a cold, calculated revenge that destroyed a town to save myself? I've wrestled with that question every single day. Let me know what you think in the comments. I read them all. And if this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt like the outsider or the scapegoat, please like this video and subscribe to the channel, because everyone has a story that deserves to be heard, and sometimes the only person who can give you a just ending is you. Thanks for listening.